Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Neurodiversity Explores. There has been a slight topic change because unfortunately Serena and Sophie couldn't join us tonight, but instead we have the lovely Taz from Taz Thoughts with us. And today we are going to change the topic to employment and employing neurodivergence. So, welcome to the stream, Taz.
Thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
Hey, so to kind of kick off, for those who don't know me, I am Kenza. I am the CEO of Neurodiversity, and Taz is one of the lovely people we was fortunate to start working with a few months ago now, which has really been great for us. I think it's been what 7, 8 months now at least that we've known each other, Taz.
Yep. Just I think coming around to 8. Yeah.
Yeah. So Taz, I know that we know most things there is about you, including all of your likes and the stuff we can both geek out over together. But would you like to tell us a bit about yourselves and Taz thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. So, hey everyone. This is Tass. We use they and we pronouns. We are autistic, and we are also a medically diagnosed system, which is dissociative identity disorder. We're also a person of color and queer and proud. So we do a lot of advocacy in those spaces, and we run a website where we provide copywriting services, and we also are writers. And yeah, that's pretty much the main things.
Oh, I see. I think this life for me is definitely soul food. Because we've always kept us being a system, private from everywhere until one of us kind of outed us on a Facebook Live. So it's like, yes, neurokin and systemkin. It's like brilliant. So now, for me, Taz, I know we're talking about employment. I think the reason why I've actually had my own businesses for so long in my history is purely due to acceptance and actually people understanding that we are different. We do need support so we can do everything we want to do. Uh, what about you? What made you bring Taz thoughts to life?
Really similar reasons with that. One of the things with work outside of running your own company is it's very difficult and sometimes impossible to find a workplace that is willing to acknowledge and accept any kind of neurodiversity. So, one of the things we learned is for work to be sustainable, we have to be our own boss, because then we're able to adapt things how we need it to be so that we can be successful. So that was why we started our own company and do the work that we enjoy, which is writing, because it doesn't ever work out well in workplaces. Even for, I think, just a little bit of context, our longest job we ever held was 2 years, and we had our first job where we even paid taxes when we were 12 years old. So we've been working a long time. And the longest place we've been able to sustain is 2 years, because the workplace environments just are not neurodiversity friendly at all.
I can definitely relate to that. Uh, I think my longest workplace was 12 years, and considering I don't like people, I was actually answering the phone at through the graveyard shift, basically dispatching cabs to people who needed them, and we did that for 12 years, and we never even thought about going into IT full time. We did it as a sideline kind of thing because we felt that the problem we had was RSD and imposter syndrome. We're not good enough to
Mm-hmm.
do IT all day, every day. I need to be stuck in a meaningless job to me where
Mm-hmm.
it's just kind of repetition over and over and over and over and over again. But during that 12 years, I did do something I didn't think I would do,
Mm-hmm.
and I did actually expand my social circle. I made loads of new friends through that job, whether they were the drivers, whether they were co-workers, whether they were passengers. So it still kind of enriched me.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I kind of lost that job where I thought, do you know what, I want to go into mainstream work. And the reason I got the job I did for 3 years, mainstream in the public sector, was because one of my relatives basically gave my boss a hard time until she employed me, basically. uh, but at the same time, once I was in the door and everything else, we got on so well, especially me and my boss. You know, I left there 3 years ago. It wasn't on great terms, and we still speak, we still help each other when needed. So I do kind of pick up friends who have been kind of supportive to me because as you've said, and I definitely agree here, that workplaces for neurodivergence can be very daunting if you don't actually get the right support. And the problem you have nowadays, and I'm going to recycle a metaphor from the other day, but you do have companies out there who boast their neurodiversity awareness, who have very diverse pictures on their websites where it shows people of color and everything else. Yet, if you actually look behind the scenes, they're not actually diverse. They just feel the societal pressure to actually portray themselves that way. Whereas obviously we face that societal pressure every day, but the societal pressure we have is the societal pressure to fit in because
Mm-hmm.
mainstream society won't accept us anyway. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yes, definitely, definitely a great example. The performance diversity is a huge thing that a lot of companies do. One of the things that we've noticed is companies like doing ads specifically like we hire neurodivergent people, we hire people with disabilities, we hire here, and it becomes more of like a promotion for these companies, like look how inclusive we are. But then when you actually go, then you learn how not inclusive it is. I think that there's a difference between saying we want neurodivergent people working with us and then actually hiring and then accommodating and providing the supports for
Yeah,
neurodivergent employees. And usually that breakdown happens where they want to hire you, but then they don't want to do the last step.
yeah,
And that's where it turns into a really toxic work environment. And in our personal experience, one of the workplaces we were at, we we learned a lot. So in that context, it was good. We learned a lot about how businesses work on the back end of things that people don't get to see. But it also was very disheartening because when you see what happens on the behind the scenes, you learn how they're not actually accepting the people that are neurodivergent on their staff. And one of the things that stuck with us at a position, our supervisor brought us in, sat us down, said, "Hey, you do great work, but you have to learn to socialize with people or it's not going to work. You have to go talk to people. You have to attend the voluntary staff event or it's not going to work." And that was that was the obstacle there. And a lot of times in neurotypical world, they put professionalism means you must be social. You don't have to do a good job. We just have to like you.
Yeah,
And so then if you do a good job, but then people don't like you, they view that as like an issue, which honestly, in a lot of the spaces that hire neurodivergent people, the things we get told by those people is always that. Like they keep complaining that I'm not being social enough. I'm doing the work. Why do I have to be
yeah.
social?
I definitely get that. We had a different experience. I suddenly got this job working for a massive public organisation in healthcare, and I found some people were inclusive, some people weren't. My boss, I absolutely love my old boss to bits. I still call her boss, and my very first day, the introduction was practically, "This is Kenza. He's autistic. He has no brain to mouth filter. If you're going to get easily offended or you really don't want a brutal answer, don't ask the question to begin with," kind of thing. And that went really well, and I kind of noticed there was a massive divide where some people were inclusive, some people weren't, and it does get too much sometimes, and I think the problem you have, I think the problem you actually have nowadays as well is that there's so many influencers or
Mm,
empowerment specialists or even advocates who say, "Look at all of this, look at all of the strengths hiring an autistic person, an ADHD person,
mm,
or whatever can give you," uh, to the stage where you're still going to have a problem even if they understand benefits, because it's not just about the benefits. Uh, you know, as I don't know about you, but for us, we always feel like we've got to prove ourselves more than anybody else. We have to give 150% consistently. We have to do everything that's thrown at us. We can't say no,
mhm,
because otherwise we're out of a job. And there's been times where I've been guilt tripped into going into work while I've been in a really bad burnout, which has triggered mental health crises and everything else. Or just because I'm good at something, I'm the only person who does it, despite working in a team with 10 others. So
mhm,
I take a day off, I stress myself out, finally build up the courage to go back to work, and suddenly there's a massive pile of tasks which
mhm,
other people could have actually helped in my absence.
mhm,
But never has somebody actually turned around to us and says, "Actually, you tend to do this quicker than anybody else. So do you mind working with this person to show them how you did it?"
mhm,
Or
mhm,
pass on, skill swap. Because actually, if you do that with one of the things we're not so good at, that actually turns it into a strength that reduces our weakness. And especially one of my weaknesses, bearing in mind I'm PDA, so I don't comply with demands anyway, but we feel like we have to say, yes, we'll do this, oh, don't worry. Whereas actually, why not actually get me sat next to two of my teammates, pass on my troubleshooting process and everything to them? They can pass it on to other people, and suddenly everybody's actually seeing better processes to work from.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know about you yourselves, Taz, but we tend to find in a neurotypical employment perspective, most of the business processes are actually more long-winded than they should be, and actually illogical, where there's actually a quicker way to get from A to B. Whereas with the way it's drafted for neurotypical employees, it goes A to Z to Y to B to D to F, and eventually you get to the end.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, and so two things that you mentioned that we wanted to touch on with that. So boundaries. So when so experience wise for us, we have a tendency to get excited and be like, oh yeah, let's do this. And then it's like later, like, oh wow, that's kind of too much. But when it comes in a workplace, people putting extra demands, I think our biggest strength in those scenarios is we will say no, and we don't just say yes to everything that a supervisor says. However, I would like to add that that usually ended in us quitting those jobs because they get pressure, and then we're just like, okay, I'll find a new job. I'm done with this type of
Yeah,
situation, which is not always a good thing. However, setting boundaries at work is a big thing. Telling people no, like, nope, I can't help you. No, I don't have time. Because, like you said, people tend to focus on the person that they know does a good job and be like, hey, here, take this, take this, take this. Even if it's not in your job description, we've had that happen where they'll be like, oh, but you do this so good. Can you just do this? And it's like, no, it's not my job description. And when it comes to like processes and things that are in place at workplaces, I think it's part of having an autistic mind in general, and I make a generalization, I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but in general, in our experience interacting with other people that are autistic, is you can get from point A to point B without skipping around like you mentioned. You don't have to do that
yeah,
because it's like that ability to see, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's how we fix it, versus here's the problem, here's the long-winded explanation of why it's a problem, here's how we might be able to fix it, but I'm not sure if we can fix it. So we kind of like cut all of that out and just
yeah,
see and focus on that. And in a neurotypical workplace, the hardest part is if you see it and you know that you can do it better. You can't just tell your supervisor, I can do this better. You have to actually then learn the socially acceptable way in quotes, to present it to your supervisor. You can't just say, oh, this doesn't work and here I can fix it. Here's why. You have to not offend them. You have to worry about, are they going to be upset? Sometimes supervisors don't care if it's inefficient and they want it the way they want
yeah,
it because they're the boss. So it becomes a really stressful environment, and it becomes a really difficult one to maintain long term because you're always operating at a higher stress level than the other neurotypical employees. And
yeah,
I think that the biggest asset to any company are neurodivergent employees, but the companies have to not try to impose neurotypical norms on said employees because then you're just creating toxicity and it's bad, like you said, for your mental health. You've had situations where it harms your mental health dealing with certain situations, and that is something we've experienced as well. Like sometimes the neurotypical way of functioning makes it impossible to stay long term in certain
Yeah,
environments. You're constantly masking, you're constantly having to analyze every tiny little thing that happens because you don't know what it actually means. And it's one of those things where in a professional setting there is that model of do as you're told and make sure everybody likes you and then do your work.
yeah,
Work is like the third priority. But like for us, work is the number one priority. Why should I talk to you for 30 minutes if I can have it done in 30 minutes? It's like that kind of
yeah.
thing.
I totally get you there because I've just actually taken out to actually learn the social cues because as you was talking about actually finding a way to approach that you can do something better. I've kind of always done it the wrong way. You know, I remember my old boss saying to us, look, we've had this problem for the past 6 months. Everybody has tried to fix it. Can you take a look at it? Obviously, I'll never be beaten. I love a challenge, me, especially when it's technology. And I've gone, yeah, sure. My boss has brought over a stack of paperwork. These are all of the call notes. These are all of the things that have been tried. And I've gone, thank you for this. Pulled a trash can from under my desk and swiped the paper straight back in and gone, yeah, that's not no use to me. I'll do it my way. Don't get me wrong, I did resolve the issue within 4 days.
After 6 months, yep, solving it exactly. And I bet they wish they would have come to you sooner.
Yeah, and that's it. And the problem as well is definitely talking about the culture as well. I found because I was able to do in 4 days, which others couldn't do in 6 months, and there had been other things I'd done what other people couldn't do who are higher paid than me and everything else. Because realistically, while I was actually working for this organisation, I didn't actually ever work at my pay level. I always worked above it, uh,
Mm.
you know, and because of that, it was very precarious for me socially because I soon made a lot of enemies because I was actually being more productive, more proactive, and it's like I've been gone 3 years now, pretty much. And occasionally my phone will still ring from one of my co-workers. I'm really stuck with this. Can you give me a help? And I haven't even worked at the place for years. And they're still using computer scripts I wrote while I was there to make my job easier,
Mhm.
kind of thing. And the way I actually left that job, it would have been totally different, I feel, if I had have been neurotypical and been a yes person who just says
Mm.
yes to everything. It's the fact that I actually spoke up and says, "Do you know what? No, I'm not going to do this because this is not what I stand for."
Mhm.
That I was taken out of employment, and
Mhm.
everybody else knew it was wrong. I had people phoning me daily to make sure I was coping okay, to make sure that mentally I was well. I had my old boss who was effing and jeffing and all sorts because she felt I shouldn't have lost my job and should have stayed.
Mm.
But ultimately, the problem you have is it's not your managers, it's not HR that needs to look at inclusion and diversity. It is the decision makers, it is your board of directors, it is your shareholders. A company has to all work together to actually instill a change in its culture.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to what you said earlier as well about outside appearances,
Mm-hmm.
just because your building has a ramp, just because your building has stairs, it doesn't mean that when you actually walk into the office space, there's actually room to get a wheelchair around. It doesn't mean that the desks are actually at a distance where people are able to maneuver around their desks and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think me personally, I think if you actually want to instill change into workforce, do it first. Invite neurodivergence into your business to identify things you could have missed. Work with organisations like yourselves and ourselves to actually make sure that you are doing it for the right reasons and
Mm-hmm.
that it's it's been implemented on not only based on the medical model, but also lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because professionals can talk about what it's like to be autistic, what it's like to have processing disorders, what it's like to be ADHD. But the fact of the matter is, it is not black and white.
Mm-hmm.
There is no bigger grey area than neurodiversity. We are all different.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you will never ever be fully inclusive. You may be inclusive today, but you may not be inclusive tomorrow because actually a new employee with additional needs is here. So you can't just do one thing and say, woohoo, we're inclusive, let's go
Mm-hmm.
with that. It is a constant thing. You do need to take your time. You do need to have somebody who focuses on the equality and diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Give your employees a space to actually say, do you know what? I think this would help me. I think this would help everyone, kind of thing. Don't just base it on the medical model because you are not being inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main problems with inclusion and why we haven't got there is because people are so reliant on the medical model and it doesn't, it is not one size fits all.
Definitely. And yes, for sure. People are very reliant on the medical model, but really, too, it really goes deep that into society as a whole because a couple things that you said kind of struck some thoughts. So, the first one, when you talked about doing other people's work like above your pay grade. So, there is a built in bias in society where when you're working with someone that is autistic, for example, they have this idea that mainstream media, based on the medical model, has painted, and they think that you have to prove yourself because you're autistic. They have that already implicit bias just sitting there. So then they put more on you, but they don't pay you what you're worth. Like when people reach out and they're like, "Hey, will you help me on this project?" but they don't want to pay you. But if they sent that to a neurotypical person, they would offer money. And so there's that unbalanced viewpoint in society that being neurodivergent makes you less than. And even if someone isn't actively doing things that shows they are ableist or have that bias, if it's implicit or explicit, doesn't matter. It's in everybody. Everyone has it. And so,
See,
and
just
oh,
you
sorry, go ahead.
saying that, just you saying that as soon as you said that less than and everything, I automatically thought of the puzzle piece going
Mm-hmm.
through my brain.
Yes, yes, exactly. Autism as a whole has been, in a way, branded by organizations, branded by mainstream media, as this thing that is wrong. It's a deficit. I don't know how many times we have this conversation with people where we actually recently had a person speak to us, and we were like, yeah, we're autistic. And immediately this person said, oh, I'm so sorry, you function so well. Instant. This was literally a couple weeks ago. Literally, that's that person's reaction. And we just kind of stared at them and we said, well, we don't subscribe to function levels, firstly. And we said, secondly, that was really offensive to say to an autistic person. So you might not want to say that next time you find out someone's autistic. That's very rude. And I think that it's all part of that implicit bias because people don't think. They're just like, oh my God, you do so well. And when it comes to leadership, that is what prevents neurodivergent people from climbing that ladder into leadership positions, because no matter how hard you try, there's always a barrier because of that implicit bias, and they think you can't. We've had jobs where we've interviewed where they said they almost didn't hire us when they found out we're autistic because they thought it would be too much trouble. Or we've had people go on the whole other spectrum, pun not intended, go on the whole other side of it and say, oh my God, you're autistic. That means you can do all my coding and you're great at math. Oh my God, I want to work with you. And it's like, no, that's not that either. Everyone's different. And so it's like that. You're really awesome, or, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know how many times we've had people tell us, oh my gosh, I'm so blessed that I'm not autistic. Your life must be so hard. And I think people, even though I there's more like intentions matter to a point, and then it just becomes that level of ignorance
Yeah.
that people speak from. And so in the workplace, that is carried with you as an autistic person, as a neurodivergent person. You're stuck with that, and you're constantly having to fight for your right to have equal
Yeah.
treatment at work and to actually not be snowballed and stuck in one place because of the implicit or explicit bias in some cases. I think one of the probably, and this one honestly was really disheartening. We had worked at a place and the supervisor had asked us our opinion on a couple things. And one of them was, hey, what types of events and causes should we look at adding to the summer calendar? So we were like, oh, we're autistic. So, hey, why don't we do some events around autism? And the supervisor looked at us dead in the eye and said, oh, no, 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 no. I want absolutely nothing to do with autism. That's a developmental disability. I don't want anything to do with that. That's too much work. Right to our face. And in all
Yeah.
honesty, that moment when we realized that the supervisor we'd worked with for over a year had no respect for us as a person. In that moment, we realized there was no respect there whatsoever. And they saw us as the autistic employee.
Mm.
We quit. We actually, and that
Yeah.
was why, because we realized, like, okay, you don't respect anything at all about our identity, and we didn't
Yeah.
stay there. But that happens a lot, and sometimes people, because of the pay gap for neurodivergent people
Yeah.
versus neurotypical people, that happens. Sometimes you can't quit a job. Sometimes you have to stay there and endure the discrimination, the ableism, the barriers to accommodations, and you don't have a choice but to stay. And all that does is wreck your mental health for however long you have to be there. And then you're burnt out by the time you get out of that environment. And then you have to start it all over again.
Yeah.
And that is something that is a it's very much embedded in society. That is goes deeper than the actual companies, and it goes to society. So the way that a company can actually, like you said, hire people to consult with you. How inclusive really are you? Better yet, when you are looking for leadership positions, directors, board members, when you're looking for managers, CEOs, look for neurodivergent people. There are millions upon millions of people that are neurodivergent that are 100% leadership material.
Oh, you've just made me think, all of these companies who have equality, equality and diversity managers, and the job description basically reads along the lines of, you can be a equality and diversity manager if you are neurotypical. And it's like, well, actually, where's actually the benefits then? Because if you're going to actually put a neurotypical in that post, you may as well just get a doctor to come in and do everything based on the medical model. Yes, we see things differently, we communicate differently, we have loads of other stuff going on. However, nobody knows how it feels to not be included more than us.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and even down to the subsections as well. Uh, you know, when it comes to the neurodivergent LGBTQIA plus community, and the neurodivergent people of colour, the neurodivergent women in tech. There is so much sub-marginalisation,
Mm-hmm.
that actually, if you want to be inclusive, get somebody who knows what the struggle is,
Mm-hmm.
because we do need to wake up. If you're going to make your company accepting and inclusive, don't do it for the statistics. Don't shout it from a rooftop, because 9 out of 10 times we are going to see through your crap and know, and to pardon the expression, but if you put lipstick on a pig, it is still a pig. So
But
we,
pigs are so cute. Sorry, I love
yes.
pigs.
I just suddenly went to ADHD moment, and I suddenly had a bay pig in the city dressed in the tutus, then, and I'm like, oh. But you know, if you want to be inclusive, you've got to do it for the right reasons. You can't do it because your company wants to look good, because 9 out of 10 times we will see through it. It will be apparent within too long. The US laws on employment are absolutely brilliant when it comes to accessibility, whether it be website accessibility, whether it be workplace accessibility. Unfortunately, the UK is not quite there yet. So we do have to fight in practically every area, whether it's workplace, education, and everything else. But just because it is not mandated by law doesn't mean you can live your life without doing it. You know, as a neurotypical, especially growing up in a somewhat neurotypical family, and with family members who never accepted me as neurodivergent,
Mm-hmm.
I would see from an early age, them trying to instill in us, treat others as you wish to be treated yourself, be kind to each other, always help somebody if they need it. Now, that was globally taught as a life lesson as a child for everybody.
Yeah.
Not so you could hit your 30s, 40s and say, well, do you know what? Now I'm 40, it doesn't matter. I will do my best for everybody, as well as long as it benefits me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let me put this bluntly, as a neurodivergent worker who owns my own company and with our own volunteers and staff, we are not your piggy bank. We are not there to make you look good. Your
Mm-hmm.
job is to make you look good by not being an idiot, by actually moving with the times to make sure that everybody does get a fair shake.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nowadays you can't nowadays you can't even switch on the news without seeing some form of marginalisation, whether it
Mm-hmm.
be an activist group or what. Uh, Yet neurodiversity has only started really getting out there in the
Mm-hmm.
past year or so.
Yeah.
Why has it taken this long? You know, I'm 32 years old. When I was in school, you wasn't dyslexic, you was just thick. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and we were actually told that once. You know, are you just thick? It's okay, just do the best as you can, and it's
Sorry.
ridiculous.
Sorry about the noise in the background. They're doing
No
maintenance.
problem.
um, when you had mentioned the U.S. versus the U.K. with the laws, so one thing we've actually, um, someone else that we had talked to had said the same thing. The sad reality is here in the U.S. is the laws are there, but no one follows them. So, as an example, there in my state, they had put in brand new sidewalks through pretty much a huge section of city. Huge section of city. They had put in brand new sidewalks. This happened about 3-4 years ago. They didn't put curb cuts for wheelchairs. They didn't put them in. And it took a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the state before they fixed it. It took like 2 years before they fixed it, and had to go through a lawsuit in order for them to fix it and have it wheelchair accessible, because they literally just didn't put the wheelchair accessibility in at all, right? So, and that happens a lot. Businesses here, you're required to be accessible, but only certain buildings. If it's a building that existed prior to the ADA's implementation in 1990, then you don't have to fix your building if it happened if it was before 1990. So there's a million of buildings here in this specific state that are not accessible for anybody, period. Whether it's a mobility aid, whether it's any kind of like other types of disabilities or neurodivergencies, it's not accessible. When it comes to the workplace, yeah, you can do the forms, you can request accommodations, but ultimately, every job we have been at where we openly disclose. I'll start with that. We openly disclose, we just say it at the beginning, we say it during the interview, like we just say it. However, every job we've had, we have always had to fight for accommodations despite the fact that they were reasonable, free,
Yeah.
free to the company and reasonable, and we still had to fight for that. So, even though there are laws in place in the US, it is still a constant fight for anybody in the disability community or words are hard, neurodivergent community. It is still a fight to have that equal access, even though legally they have to.
So I'm actually going to put up a comment here. But yeah, the majority of neurodivergent people do work for themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
that's because of the lack of inclusivity and
Mm-hmm.
even flexibility. And it's ridiculous because, especially during the COVID pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
mental health has been pushed so hard And because it's been pushed so hard, every company's doing mental health awareness days, they're doing staff retreats and things like that. And it's like, hello, multi-divergent over here. I kind of have my own problems,
Mhm.
you know. And especially with the pandemic, don't get me wrong, being a multi-divergent, I love having my own space and I love days where I don't have to people. It's
Mhm.
glorious.
Mhm.
However, I still need to do it once in a while. There are still my special people I have to interact with. So I spent however long it was totally isolated, not seeing those people. That hit me hard. And the reality is, you can have those mental health check-ins and everything else, and you can have those retreats.
Mhm.
But what you also need to remember is we even process that differently as well. So just because it may work for your neurotypical employees doesn't mean it works for us.
Exactly. And I think that's a really good point. They group it and say, okay, well, the majority will do good with this, so we'll go do this. One of the things that with the pandemic and all that happened is a lot of companies realize that their employees can work from home and do better and do get more done and be more productive. And then now 2 years later, these same companies are removing the availability of remote work. So that door had opened for a lot of neurodivergent people and people with
Yeah.
disabilities to be able to actually have a job they can sustain. And then they closed the door for in-office work. And I think we've heard mixed reasons for this, but the one we hear the most of, well, I have to make sure my employees are doing their job. And it's like, if you hire the right people and if you were a good leader, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Like, that's the reality. Like, if you are doing your job right, then you don't have to worry. It's like if your
Oh,
employees working from home, if you're a good leader, they'll get it done.
thank you for joining our team. We have sent you a remote working kit. The remote working kit consists of a company phone, a company laptop, a company t-shirt, a company backstop, and 10 IP surveillance cameras so we can watch you work and take your bathroom breaks.
Exactly. And if you take just 5 seconds over for your break, I am going to DM you right now. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and that's really what it comes down to. And I think that in in society, the idea that the only way you're productive is sitting in an office space while there's people watching you work. Micromanaging is
Yeah.
bad for everybody. It's bad for
Yeah.
the person doing it. It's bad for the person receiving the micromanagement. It just creates negativity where it doesn't need to be. And I also think that the work itself, there has to be this level of reasonableness that doesn't exist in professional circles. People want you to do it right and get it done the first time perfectly, but they don't want to actually give you clear instructions. They send you a 2-page email that you have to print out and highlight the key points in order to figure out what they actually need you to do. And then if you miss one of those in that 2-page email, from experience, 2-page email, then they get mad. Well, you didn't do this right. And it's like, well, you didn't tell me you wanted that. you
Hold
know?
on, that doesn't happen in the workplace, you know. We never get emails that should have been meetings, and we never have meetings that should have just been emails.
Oh, yeah,
You
no,
know, in this day and
totally.
age, it's ridiculous because nowadays you actually hold meetings to arrange to have a meeting, and it's just like, oh,
Exactly. I think one of the things that it's one of our pet peeves with like, oh, hold on, that comment, I just love that. I would highlight the whole email. Oh my gosh, right? Yes, the vibes are real. I think that one of the things in the workplace is there's a high expectation on employees, but a low expectation on supervisors.
yeah.
And
Oh,
then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, you've literally, you speaking about emails, you have actually just reminded me of a glorious email I had while I was working for a public health organisation, which I cannot name, but their name consists of three letters. uh, uh, and my particular trust actually sent out a massive guide on accessibility, saying we need to be more accessible. This is how you can be accessible, and it was basically a guide on how to write accessible letters and everything else. And you know what the first things I did was
What?
put all of the comments in red.
What?
And I'm like, okay, you
God.
you have just sent me a 24-page document on how to write accessible letters and documentation that is easier for everybody to read, and you have just made all of the comments and all of the justifications in the colour that is the most prevalent problem colour for dyslexics.
Yes. Like, let's
it,
just say
it's
this right
it's
now.
like
Stop the red.
it's like, way to go. What's next? You're gonna draw up revision 2 and only send out the guide as hard copy in braille.
Right? Well, no, and the thing is, it's so ironic. It's an accessibility guide, and then that's so ironic. Then they put it in red. Just a
Yes.
great rule for any company: don't use red text. There you go.
No.
Easy. Don't use red text. Don't use red. Don't put yellow on white. Don't put like. Don't just stop.
Yeah. See, and it's funny because I remember a mini Kenza from before we was a system, and I didn't like SATs, so I actually
Mm.
wrote a letter of complaint to the Prime Minister and actually got a letter back. And I remember writing the letter and having the pen taken off me and being given a different pen, because you never write in red pen because it's passive aggressive and can be threatening.
Yep.
And it's like now everybody's using red on websites, they're using red on prints, logos, and everything else. It's like even the live button in the corner on the streaming app is red, which is absolutely great. The only problem is because that little red box is there, I can't actually see the view account, I can't see the time next to it, and that little red box to me as a dyslexic individual is going doink 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 doink.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like, and that is really good to say because I think a lot of times when things are designed, they don't think about that. And
No.
actually, a large number of the world population is dyslexic. There's no
Yes.
reason for things to still be inaccessible when you're dyslexic because, like, like that
Yeah.
should be just automatically at this point in 2022, that should be automatically put into design consideration every time.
And And you know what? The number one cause I don't think now's the right time to become accessible, because the cost of doing that
Mhm.
would be too much for us. Okay, so two things. First of all, the cost is not too much. That's actually called penance. You know, if do you know what would have been great? It would have been great and also a lot cheaper if you'd have actually incorporated that in the very first steps. Uh,
Yeah, because then you don't have to pay to change it later. It's harder to change it later than
precisely.
you do it before. And it's true. A lot of places will say, oh, it's too expensive. Oh, accommodations are too expensive. It's like, okay, first of all, wearing a set of noise canceling earmuffs or headphones while working is doesn't cost you anything whatsoever.
Nope.
You just are trying to micromanage what your employee is doing.
Yeah.
We actually had to at one position fight to be able to wear noise canceling headphones. And so what we said was, okay, we asked a couple of people around the office. We're like, okay, you all need to wear these. And we bought like the dollar ones from Dollar Tree. Like, you all need to wear these for a day. Okay. And then you tell us, did it make it impossible for you to work and answer people? And out of the 10 people that tried it, none of them, they all liked it better. So then
Yeah.
it's like, then you bring it up. It's like, okay, you say it's too expensive. Well, you can buy these for $1 and
Yeah.
you can give them to everybody and everyone will work better. Like, or you can just, like, I can just bring my own and I can wear them. And it's,
Yeah.
people always think accommodation equals cost. And that's like another thing that people have in the back of their mind. It's like, if you say, I'm autistic, oh, this is going to be expensive. Like, that's literally, it goes here to here so quick. But that's really a myth, because accessible technology, accessible items, they do not put an undue burden on the company. All it does is
Nope.
boost the company, because then your
And
neurodivergent
the
employees have what they
productivity.
need. Exactly. Then they have what they need and they can be
Yeah.
successful at work. And you invested in your employee. And now this will carry through to all the other people you hire. They're neurodivergent, and you'll have
Yeah.
options for them that might work for them.
Absolutely. And the thing is as well, there's government schemes to
Mm-hmm.
support your employees. You know, there's access to work. There's probably the same in America.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and even down to website accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not just your customers who use the website. Your staff use the website too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, design considerations, WCAG guidelines, and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if you actually look at it, okay, let's just put this bluntly. Uh, your website is full of red. Guess what? You've just lost every customer who's dyslexic because
Mm-hmm.
they can't navigate. So actually, for the sake of a couple of £100 or a couple of $100, you've actually lost about a 25% revenue stream in your company straight off. How does that feel? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, your website isn't really screen reader friendly. Guess what? You've
Mm-hmm.
just lost those customers who are partially sighted or have visual processing difficulties like Mears-Eyler syndrome, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Mears-Eyler syndrome, that's the one. You know, you're actually cutting your nose off to spite your face, and
Mm-hmm.
there's actually just not a reason for it.
Yeah, not at all. And a lot of times, too, people assume that certain types of accessible technology are only for one type of person. So, like, for example, screen readers, they'll be all like, well,
Yeah.
I don't have anyone blind or low vision that buys for me. It's like, but I'm like, well, hold up, hold up. First of all, they can't, because they can't use the screen reader to buy from you. And secondly, they're not the only ones that use it. Like you mentioned, any type of visual processing. Also, cognitive processing. Like for us
Yeah.
personally, we have a cognitive processing delay. We will use screen readers so that we can actually get the information, because sometimes we just can't process it. So people always kind of put a label on it, like this only applies to this, but it doesn't.
Could I ask you what screen reader you actually use?
Yes, Jaws.
Jaws. Okay, I've never actually dealt with Jaws before, but I do work with a few people who do use Jaws. Because I use a screen reader myself, and I use Claro, uh,
Nice.
Claro Speak, because it it is one of those, because I use my screen reader. Obviously, I do use the visual overlay, I use the reading
Mm-hmm.
rule, and
Mm-hmm.
everything else. But at the same time, I also use Claro software on my phone. I have bouts of verblessness,
Mm-hmm.
so I actually use a software so I can hit my predefined chats or type in something new. My phone speaks for me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and the thing is as well, there's a likelihood that if a person who has additional needs, as you've said, comes into your company, there is actually a high likelihood that they already have the stuff they need. They may
Mm-hmm.
have the screen reading software already. They may actually have it licensed for multiple computers.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, what you actually need to do there is rather that, so you make a judgment call, will this benefit my business? What is the chance that we may have somebody else who needs this? As soon as you've made that, you can make a call. Actually, do you know what? We're going to get 10 licenses just in case. We'll
Mm-hmm.
make an investment because it's not actually an expense. It is an investment. Adaptations for neurodivergence and anybody with additional needs is not a burden expense. They are investments because by actually implementing into them and giving back to them the same ways they are giving back to you, you're actually making your business better.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
more businesses need to actually get more inclusive, and the following year actually look at your financials, look at your statistics, see how your year's actually gone. Because
Mm-hmm.
whether it's minute in the first year, I can guarantee you that it would have gone up.
Exactly. And I think that's a great way of putting it. It's an investment. It's not a burden. And I think that in companies, that mentality of it's a burden starts with leadership, and then
Yeah,
it kind of goes down to everyone else. So it's important for leadership to be like, this is an investment because we value the skills these people have and they're working,
yeah,
they do good work. Let's make it easier for them. Let's make them have a good mental health day because they have what they need to do the job and they're not having
yeah,
to stress about it all day long. How are they going to get it done? And I think that diversity in leadership is something that needs to be there. Personal
yeah,
opinion, any company that says they hire neurodivergent people need to have someone on their leadership team that is neurodivergent, period. Because that's the only
yeah,
way that team will understand what the employees actually need instead of trying to mold them and fit them into the neurotypical box. If you have a person that is a leader that is neurodivergent, they'll get it and they can then
yeah,
create the policies, create the processes, explain it. And I think a lot of times, at least in our experience, the less diverse the leadership is, the more problems you have as a neurodivergent person. And I mean diverse in general,
yeah,
any diversity. If this is like not the PC way to say this at all, but we worked at a company and the entire leadership team, they were all cis white men and cis white women, period. No diversity in
yeah,
that at all. So then when employees had things happening, when employees needed things, they didn't get it. They're like, well, why is that a big deal? That's not a big deal. Why is that a big deal? Because they had never experienced those
yeah,
types of being marginalized and oppressed by society. They didn't get it.
yeah,
So, like, you want to have a diverse leadership team in order to actually make your company inclusive. It has to start at the top and then
yeah.
work its way down.
I totally get that, and I think that's actually a really good place to end our slot. Just give me a second. Uh, so yeah, Taz, thank you so much for joining me. And to everybody who has popped in and off the streams, whether you're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, feel free to check Neurodiversity out. Uh, 1 second. Of course, I will put the details at the bottom of the screen. Here we go. Just doing the dyslexic thing and double checking I've spelt it right. uh, but yes, Taz, thank you so much for joining us despite the sudden change of plans. This has been such a fruitful chat. And the other thing that I've loved about this as well is here at Neurodiversity, we are US and UK, so we see things from both sides. So actually having a somebody we've worked with across the pond with us, that is absolutely brilliant. So thank you, Taz, for joining us. And we will definitely have to get you on again soon at some point. And to everybody who's joining us, thank you for popping in. Feel free to visit neurodiversity.org.uk. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. You can connect with us on Facebook. You can like and subscribe on YouTube. And you can also see us on Twitch. We get about a bit. We like to be everywhere. I think it's safe to say we are practically ubiquitous. so, so thank you everyone. Have a good evening, and I will see you next week for yet another Neurodiversity Explores.